Good evening, London! Tonight is the most visible manifestation of what C.S. Lewis meant when he articulated one of the most important reasons for reading. For we are not alone when we read. We are with another's imagination, meeting it somewhere in the middle. And it is through reading that we can understand others better. We can understand that which we are not. We can travel to different times and different places and different cultures. But at the core of World Book Night is also the physical sharing of books. Many of you in the audience are here because you are going to be givers and therefore crucial players in this act of sharing. Yeah! By which 1 million books are passed from one reader to another tomorrow. Nothing on this scale has ever been attempted before. We are literally making history. We are also making literary history. There has never ever been a gathering on the scale of what we're all part of here today in Trafalgar Square. This is a giant celebration of writers and writing, readers and reading, and a fitting way to launch World Book Night. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to our Master of Ceremonies for this evening, the one and only Graham Norton, who is going to take over the controls from here on in.
Why, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. What, do I have a big ass? Is that what you're saying? Hello, Trafalgar Square. I'm thrilled to be part of this really unique event. It really is special. Reading, as Jamie said, it can be quite a solitary thing. So how fantastic to look around at Trafalgar Square just full of book lovers. You may be surprised to learn that not only can I read, I enjoy it. Now, my job tonight is very, very simple, which is kind of why I'm doing it. It would demean anybody better. All I'm doing is introducing this incredibly stellar lineup of authors. They really are kind of just literally greats back there. It's extraordinary. But before we meet our readers tonight, tonight obviously is about the 20,000 people who are going to be giving away the 1 million books. So where are the givers? I know some givers are here tonight. Well done. Prepare to be annoyed because 8 givers got seats on sofas. No, you like them really. You're all sharing in one big happy experience. You're just colder than they are. Let's meet one of them. Hello, sir. Who are you?
My name's Keith.
And where are you from, Keith?
I'm from Hatfield in Hertfordshire.
Yes, you never know. And which book are you going to be giving away?
I'm giving away The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Night Time.
A popular choice. And who are you going to be giving it to, sir?
What I'm doing, I'm going to St Albans train station tomorrow evening. People will be going out to town for a night out. I'm saying, read this by the time you get off or change at King's Cross. If you don't think it's a fantastic book, give it to the person next to you because they will.
I like it. I like it. Passing it along. Very good. Let's meet another. Hello, lady. What's your name?
I'm Julia. I'm here because I was one of the people who chose the 25 titles. So I was on the editorial selection committee. I'm from Foyles, just up the road. And I was one of 25 people who chose the books that are being given away tomorrow. So I feel a little bit like I'm giving away all of them. I'm driving a Foyles van around London tomorrow, giving away a handful of them from the back of it. So if anybody is in London, sees a Foyles van, wave, shout, and take a book from the back of it.
Excellent. So look out for that Foyles van. Right, we're starting the evening with a Booker Prize winner, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, I know. He won the prize in 2003 for his novel Vernon God Little. I believe there's an adaptation of it still on at the Young Vic as well. Tonight, he will be setting the London scene by reading from the opening lines of Charles Dickens' Bleak House. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our first reader, DBC Pierre.
London. Michaelmas term lately over, and the Lord Chancellor sitting in Lincoln's Inn Hall. implacable November weather. As much mud in the streets as if the waters had but newly retired from the face of the earth. And it would not be wonderful to meet a megalosaurus, 40 feet long or so, waddling like an elephantine lizard up Holborn Hill. Smoke lowering down from chimney pots, making a soft black drizzle, with flakes of soot in it, as big as full-grown snowflakes. Gone into mourning, one might imagine, for the death of the sun. Dogs, undistinguishable in mire. Horses, scarcely better, splashed to their very blinkers. Foot passengers, jostling one another's umbrellas in a general infection of ill temper and losing their foothold at street corners, where tens of thousands of other foot passengers have been slipping and sliding since the day broke, if this day ever broke, adding new deposits to the crust upon crust of mud, sticking at those points tenaciously to the pavement and accumulating at compound interest. Fog everywhere. Fog up the river where it flows among green aits and meadows. Fog down the river where it rolls defiled among the tiers of shipping and the waterside pollutions of a great and dirty city. Fog on the Essex marshes, fog on the Kentish heights, fog creeping into the cabooses of collier brigs, fog lying out on the yards and hovering in the rigging of great ships, fog drooping on the gunwales of barges and small boats, fog in the eyes and throats of ancient Greenwich pensioners, wheezing by the firesides of their wards, fog in the stem and bowl of the afternoon pipe of the wrathful skipper down in his close cabin, fog cruelly pinching the toes and fingers of his shivering little prentice boy on deck, chance people on the bridges peeping over the parapets into a nether sky of fog, with fog all round them, as if they were up in a balloon and hanging in the misty clouds. Gas looming through the fog in diverse places in the streets, much as the sun may, from the spongy fields, be seen to loom by husbandman and ploughboy. Most of the shops lighted 2 hours before their time, as the gas seems to know, for it has a haggard and unwilling look. The raw afternoon is rawest, and the dense fog is densest, and the muddy streets are muddiest, near that leaden-headed old obstruction, appropriate ornament for the threshold of a leaden-headed old corporation, Temple Bar. And hard by Temple Bar, in Lincoln's Inn Hall, at the very heart of the fog, sits the Lord High Chancellor in his High Court of Chancery. Never can there come fog too thick, never can there come mud and mire too deep to assort with the groping and floundering condition which this High Court of Chancery, most pestilent of hoary sinners, holds this day in the sight of heaven and earth.
Thank you very much. Our next reader is one of my favorite authors. She's written 5 novels, and one of those novels is one of the 25 World Book Night titles that will be given away. That book is Fingersmith. She's going to be reading for, I know, it's fantastic, it's such a good book. Please welcome Sarah Waters. Woo!
Fingersmith set in London in the 1860s, and at this point it's narrated by a girl called Sue Trinder, who's grown up as an orphan in a kind of thieves' kitchen in the borough in Lant Street. She's been raised by foster parents, I suppose, Mr. Ibbs, who's a fence, and Mrs. Suxby, who's a baby farmer. And Sue is here describing how they dealt at Lant Street with stolen goods, or what they call poke. Good coins we kept, of course. Bad ones come up too bright and must be slummed with blacking and grease before you pass them on. Silks and linens, there are ways of washing and pressing to make them seem new. Gems I would shine with ordinary vinegar. Silver plate we ate our suppers off, but only the once because of the crests and stampings, and when we'd finished, Mr. Ibbs would take the cups and bowls and melt them into bars. He did the same with gold and pewter. He never took chances, that's what made him so good. Everything that came into our kitchen looking like one sort of thing was made to leave it again looking quite another. and though it had come in the front way, the shop way, the Lant Street way, it left by another way too. It left by the back. There was no street there. What there was a little covered passage in a small dark court. You might stand in that and think yourself baffled. There was a path, however, if you knew how to look. It took you to an alley, and that met a winding black lane which ran to the arches of the railway line. And from one of those arches led another, darker lane that would take you, very quick and inconspicuous, to the river. We knew 2 or 3 men who kept boats there. All along that crooked way, indeed, lived pals of ours. We could send poke from our kitchen through any of them to all the parts of London. We could pass anything at all, at speeds which would astonish you. We could pass ice in August before a quarter of the block should have had a chance to turn to water. We could pass sunshine in summer. Mr. Ibbs would find a buyer for it. In short, there was not much that was brought to our house that was not moved out of it again rather sharpish. There was only one thing, in fact, that had come and got stuck, one thing that had somehow withstood the tremendous pull of that passage of poke, one thing that Mr. Ibbs and Mrs. Saxby seemed never to think to put a price to. I mean, of course, me. I had my mother to thank for that. Her story was a tragic one. She'd come to Lant Street on a certain night in 1844. She'd come, very large, dear girl, with you, Mrs. Saxby said, by which, until I learned better, I took her to mean that my mother had brought me perhaps tucked in a pocket behind her skirt or sewn into the lining of her coat. For I knew she was a thief. What a thief, Mrs. Saxby would say, so bold and handsome. Was she, Mrs. Saxby, I'd ask, was she fair? Fairer than you, she'd answer, but sharp like you about the face, and thin as paper. We put her upstairs. No one knew she was here save me and Mr. Ibbs, for she was wanted, she said, by the police of 4 divisions, and if they'd got her, she'd swing. I know she was hard as a nut, for she had you, Sue, and I swear she never murmured, never called out once. She only looked at you and put a kiss on your little head. Then she gave me £6 for the keeping of you, all of it in sovereigns, and all of them good. She said she had one last job to do that would make her fortune. She meant to come back for you when her way was clear. So Mrs. Saxby told it, and every time, though her voice would start off steady, it would end up trembling and her eyes would fill with tears. For she'd waited for my mother, and my mother hadn't come. What came instead was awful news. The job that was meant to make her fortune had gone badly. A man had been killed trying to save his plate. It was my mother's knife that killed him. Her own pal peached on her. The police caught up with her at last. She was a month in prison. Then they hanged her. They hanged her, as they did murderesses then, on the roof of the Horsemonger Lane jail. Mrs. Saxby stood and watched the drop from the window of the room that I was born in. You got a marvellous view of it from there, the best view in South London, everybody said. People were prepared to pay very handsomely for a spot at that window on hanging days. And though some girls shrieked when the trap went rattling down, I never did. I never once shuddered or winked. That's Susan Trinder, someone might whisper then. Her mother was hanged as a murderess. Ain't she brave? Okay, stop it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. The next reader, he probably coined the phrase national treasure, and we now lay that term firmly at his charming feet. He is an author, playwright, screenwriter, but most importantly tonight, author of one of the 25 World Book Night titles, A Life Like Other People's. Reading from that book, please welcome Alan Bennett.
I tried to find somewhere in the book where there were jokes, but there aren't really very many jokes in it. And it's about the end of my mother's life when she was in an old people's home in Weston-super-Mare. That there is something not right around homes for the elderly is evident in the language associated with them. It's swampy, terms do not quite fit and categories start to slip. A home is not a home, but neither is it a hospital, nor yet a hotel. What do we call the old people who live and die there? Are they residents, patients, inmates? No word altogether suits. And who looks after them? Nurses? Not really, since very few of them are qualified. As Mam herself pointed out early in her residency, they're not nurses, these. Most of them are just lassies. And not knowing what to call them makes getting hold of one difficult, not least for the residents. In a hospital, it would be nurse. Here, it tends to be hello, hello, which said to nobody in particular and sometimes to an empty room already sounds deranged. Of course, calling them by name could be the answer, but though the staff all wear their name tags, names are what these lost women are not good at. Not being good at names, one of the things that has brought them here in the first place. And what do I call them? A visitor. Even if I cared for the word caring, carer is not a word you can call down a corridor. As it is, and feeling like one of those old-fashioned gentlemen who call every policeman officer, I settle for nurse, remembering at the same time Mrs. Catchpole, Alan Bates's mother-in-law, who, incarcerated in the geriatric ward at the Royal Free, remarked bitterly of one such nurse whom she called Bouncing Betty. She's not as highly qualified as she makes out, and she has very hard hands. These blurred classifications, a home that is not a home, a nurse who is not a nurse, arise because, strictly speaking, the people in homes are not ill. It is not sickness that has brought them here, so much as incurable incompetence. They are not dying, they are just incapable of living, though capable of being long-lived nevertheless. My mother lives like this for 15 years. I'm too cold to turn it over, sorry. I sit in the upstairs room and hold my mother's hand, the skin now just a translucent sheath for the bones, and a hand anyone who comes into the room is free to take and hold, as Mam will not mind or even noticed. One of the maids now erupts into the room and seizes Mam's hand, stroking her face and kissing her lavishly. Isn't she a love? Aren't you a love? Aren't we pretty this morning? Who's going to give me a kiss? The dialogue makes me wince, and the delivery of it seems so much bad acting, better directed at a parrot or a Pekingese. But irritatingly, Mam seems to enjoy it, this grotesque performance eliciting far more of a response than my more tasteful contribution. But then taste has always been my handicap, and so it is here, when in this sponged and squeegeed bedroom, with an audience of indifferent old women, I do not care to unbend, call my mother chick, fetch my face close to hers, and tell her or shout at her how much I love her, and how we all love her, and what a treasure she is. Instead, smiling sadly, I lightly stroke her limp hand, so ungarish my display of affection I might be the curate, not the son. The nurses, or whatever, have more sense. They know they're in a carry-on film. I'm playing it like it's Brief Encounter. Aren't you good, Lily? You've eaten all your mince. Now she's Lily who's eaten all her mince and polished off her Arctic roll, and her eyes close, her mouth opens, and her head falls sideways on the pillow. She's a real card, is Lily. We always have a laugh. Her name's actually Lillian, I say primly. I know, but we call her Lily. The strip lights go on this winter afternoon, and I get ready to leave. I never come away, but I think this may be the last time I shall see her, and it's almost a superstition, therefore, that before I leave, I should make eye contact with her. But to make her see me is not easy. Sometimes it means bringing my head down, my cheek on the coverlet in order to intercept her eye line and obtrude on her gaze. In this absurd position, my head virtually in her lap, I say, "Goodbye, Mum, goodbye," trying as I say it, my head pressing into the candle wick, to picture her with Dad. Getting no response, I kiss her and go to the door, looking back for what I always think will be the last time. What I want to see is her gazing lovingly after me, her eyes brimming with tears, or even just looking. But she's not noticed I've gone, and I might never have been in the room at all. I walk to the station. Just one more thing. When I learned to read, the only books we had access to was at the local library in Leeds. And libraries are being closed all over the place now, and the people who are going to suffer are children. And closing libraries is child abuse. It mustn't happen.
Well said, Alan Bennett. Now, you'll know our next reader as a star of stage and screen, but he's also the author of the best-selling, critically acclaimed memoir, Red Carpets and Other Banana Skins. Tonight, he's going to be reading from one of his favourite books, which is Graham Greene's Travels with My Aunt. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Rupert Everett.
Hi. This extract comes at the end of a story told by my favourite Graham Greene hero, Henry Pulling, a mousy retired bank manager whose life is completely changed by a chance meeting with his eccentric aunt. From gardening in suburban Southwood to gun running in Paraguay, Travels with My Aunt is the coming of old age story of all time. So here goes. I went slowly back towards the house to break the news as gently as I could to Aunt Augusta that Wordsworth was dead. The musicians were still playing on the terrace. They were tired out and almost falling asleep over their instruments. But when I entered the sala, there remained only one couple, my aunt and Mr. Visconti. I was reminded of the house behind the Messaggero, where they had met after a long separation and danced together between the sofas while the prostitutes watched with amazement. They were dancing a slow waltz now, and they never saw me enter. Two old people bound in the deep, incurable egotism of passion. They turned off the lights, and in the big room, illumined only from the terrace, there rested pools of darkness between the windows. As they moved, I lost their faces and found them again. At one moment, the shadows gave my aunt a deceptive air of youth. She looked like the young woman in my father's photograph, pregnant with happiness. And at another, I recognized the old woman who had faced Miss Patterson with such merciless cruelty and jealousy. I called out to her as she went by, "Aunt Augusta," but she didn't answer to the name. They danced on in their tireless passion into the shadows. I took a few steps further into the room as they returned towards me, calling to her a second time. "Mother, Wordsworth's dead." She only looked over her partner's shoulder and said, "Yes, dear, all in good time, but can't you see that now I'm dancing with Mr. Visconti?" A flashbulb broke the shadows up. I have the photograph still. All three of us are petrified by the lightning flash into a family group. You can see the great gap in Visconti's teeth as he smiles towards me like an accomplice. I have my hand thrown out in a frozen appeal, and my mother is regarding me with an expression of tenderness and reproof. I've cut from the print another face which I hadn't realized was in the room with us, the face of a little old man with long moustaches. He had been first with the news, and Mr. Visconti sacked him later at my insistence. My mother took no part in the dispute, which she said was a matter to be settled between men. So Wordsworth did not go entirely unavenged. Not that I have time to think of the poor fellow very much. Mr. Visconti has not yet made a fortune, and our import-export business takes more and more of my time. We've had our ups and downs, and the photographs of what we call the Great Party and of our distinguished guests have proved useful more than once. We own a complete Dakota aeroplane now, for our partner was accidentally shot dead by a policeman because he couldn't make himself understood in Guarani, and most of my spare time is spent in learning that language. Next year, when she's 16, I'm to marry the daughter of the Chief of Customs, a union which has the approval of Mr. Visconti and her parents. There is, of course, a considerable difference in our ages, but she's a gentle and obedient child, and often in the warm, scented evenings, we read Browning together. God's in his heaven, all's right with the world.
Thank you very much, Rupert. I'm just going to say hello to another, some givers. Hello, and who are you?
Harriet Spicer.
And where does Harriet Spicer live?
HiBrow.
HiBrow? Nothing. And what book have you chosen to give away?
Beloved by Toni Morrison.
And what is it about that book that you wanted to share with people?
I read it 25 years ago, and I can still remember the physical impact it made on me. It's a story that had to be told, and it's exquisitely told by a fine writer.
Well said. Very good. I'll just go down here. Hello. Hi. I'll do that. Who are you?
I'm Grace Quanser, also a cubba, a storyteller from Ealing in West London.
They're loving Ealing, loving it. And what book are you giving away?
Half of A Yellow Sun, moving, set in Nigeria, Biafra, 1960s, very moving. Read it. It's wonderful.
And who are you going to give it to?
I'm going to give it to some women in a women's refuge in Ealing, Shepherd's Bush writing group, and anyone who's passionate about reading.
All right, thank you very much. Let's get back to our authors. Our next author, her debut novel, I'm sure you know it, Brick Lane, was made into a film. Her latest novel, it's going to be released later this month. It's called Untold Story, and it's inspired by the life of Princess Diana. But tonight, we'll be reading from Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse. Please welcome Monica Ali.
Hello. Hello. Now, if you see me shaking, it's not because I'm scared, it's because I'm freezing. Or maybe a little bit of both. Virginia Woolf is my favourite of all the great modernist writers, and she once said that the one and only experience that she would never write about would be her own death. Fortunately for us as readers, she did write about every other experience in wonderful, luminous detail. William Banks was praising the Waverley novels. He read one of them every 6 months, he said. And why should that make Charles Tansley angry? He rushed in, all thought Mrs. Ramsay, because Prue will not be nice to him, and denounced the Waverley novels when he knew nothing about it. Nothing about it whatsoever, Mrs. Ramsay thought, observing him rather than listening to what he said. She could see how it was from his manner. He wanted to assert himself, and so it would always be with him, till he got his professorship or married his wife, and so need not always be saying, I. For that was what his criticism of poor Sir Walter, or perhaps it was Jane Austen, amounted to, I. He was thinking of himself and the impression he was making, as you could tell by the sound of his voice, and his emphasis and his uneasiness. Success would be good for him. At any rate, they were off again. Now she need not listen. It could not last, she knew, but at the moment her eyes were so clear that they seemed to go round the table, unveiling each of these people and their thoughts and their feelings without effort, like a light stealing under water, so that its ripples and the reeds in it and the minnows balancing themselves and the sudden silent trout are all lit up, hanging, trembling. So she saw them, she heard them, but whatever they said had also this quality, as if what they said was like the movement of a trout, when at the same time one can see the ripple in the gravel, something to the right, something to the left, and the whole is held together. For whereas in active life she would be netting and separating one thing from another, she would be saying she liked the Waverley novels or had not read them, she would be urging herself forward. Now she said nothing. For the moment she hung suspended. Ah, but how long do you think it'll last? Said somebody. It was as if she had antennae trembling out from her, which, intercepting certain sentences, forced them upon her attention. This was one of them. She scented danger for her husband. A question like that would lead almost certainly to something being said which reminded him of his own failure. How long would he be read? He would think at once. William Banks, who was entirely free from all such vanity, laughed and said he attached no importance to changes in fashion. Who could tell what was going to last, in literature or indeed in anything else? Let us enjoy what we do enjoy, he said. His integrity seemed to Mrs. Ramsay quite admirable. He never seemed for a moment to think, but how does this affect me? But then, if you had the other temperament, which must have praise, which must have encouragement, naturally you began, and she knew that Mr. Ramsay was beginning to be uneasy, to want somebody to say, "Oh, but your work will last, Mr. Ramsay," or something like that. He showed his uneasiness quite clearly now by saying, with some irritation, that anyhow Scott, or was it Shakespeare, would last him his lifetime. He said it irritably. Everybody, she thought, felt a little uncomfortable without knowing why. Then Minter Doyle, whose instinct was fine, said bluffly, absurdly, that she did not believe that anyone really enjoyed reading Shakespeare. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, as we already know, one of the titles we're giving away is The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, as illustrated. There we go, lovely. I'm thrilled that the author of that book is here tonight, but he won't be reading from that book. He'll be reading from one of the other titles on the list. It's Alexander Masters' Stuart, A Life Backwards. Trafalgar Square, please welcome Mark Haddon.
I thought I wouldn't read from my own book because I'll probably pass into a kind of standing coma, having read it quite a lot. I mean, it's good and everything, but... I'm reading the first chapter from this book for two reasons. One, because it is absolutely fantastic. Beg, borrow, buy, or steal a copy. Second reason, a really good book does an absolutely extraordinary thing that nothing else in the world can do, which is give you instant, intimate access into the mind of another human being. Whether they've been dead for 2,000 years, whether they live on the other side of the world, or as in this case, whether they're people who have been pushed to the very margins of society. The kind of person who can be 6 feet away from you and remain completely invisible. I think a really good book is a little engine of empathy and compassion. Stuart was a homeless man living in Cambridge. We're standing here tonight near Martins in the Fields, where the connection provides lots of services for homeless people. There'll be lots of homeless people in Trafalgar Square tonight. World Book Night is about giving and sharing things for free in a world that's obsessed with money and profit. Books like this are a celebration of empathy and compassion at a time when we're desperately short of both. Chapter 1. Stuart does not like the manuscript. Through the pale Tesco stripes of his supermarket bag, I can see the wedge of my papers, 2 years' worth of interviews and literary effort. What's the matter with it? It's bollocks boring. He fumbles in the lumpy bulges of his pockets, looking for roll-up papers, then drops into my armchair and pushes his face forward, surveying the drab collection of twigs and dead summertime experiments on my balcony. Outside it is getting dark. The trees in the garden have started to grow in size and lose their untended shapes. I don't mean to be rude. I know you put a lot of work in, Stuart offers. Put briefly, his objection is this: I drone on. He wants jokes, yarns, humour. He doesn't admire academic quotes and background research. Nah, Alexander, you've got to start again. You've got to do better than this. He's after a bestseller, like what Tom Clancy writes. But you are not an assassin trying to frazzle the president with anthrax bombs, I point out. You are an ex-homeless, ex-junkie psychopath, I do not add. Stuart phrases it another way: something what people will read. There are numerous types of homeless person. There are those who are doing all right beforehand but have suffered a temporary setback because their wife has run off with another man, or surprisingly often another woman. Their business may have collapsed. Their daughter has been killed in a car crash, or both. Then there are the ones who suffer from chronic poverty brought on by illiteracy or social ineptness, or what are politely called learning disabilities. Perhaps they are dyslexic, autistic, shy to the point of inanity, never went to school, They may be just ill or blind or deaf or dumb. The youngsters who have fallen out with their parents or who have come out of care and don't know what to do next or even how to make their own breakfast. Ex-convicts and ex-army. Take away the format of their lives and all they can do is crumple downwards. This is just the beginning. Right at the bottom of this abnormal heap are the people such as Stuart, the chaotic homeless. The chaotic are beyond repair. When Stuart was first discovered, Caspar Hauser-like crouching on the lowest subterranean floor of a multi-storey car park, the regular homeless wanted nothing to do with him. They called him Knife Man Dan and that mad bastard on level D. But something remarkable has happened since then. He is not quite so much of a drug-addicted nightmare. No one can understand it. It is highly unusual, suspicious even. All chaotic people have good and bad periods, but Stuart genuinely appears to have turned over a new leaf. He has separated himself from the street community, got himself onto the council housing list, started a methadone program to get off heroin, renegotiated his court fines and begun paying fortnightly instalments, even bought himself a discount computer. So here it is, my second attempt at the story of Stuart Shorter, thief, hostage taker, psycho and sociopathic street raconteur, my spy on how the British chaotic underclass spend their troubled days at the beginning of the 21st century, a man with an important life. I wish I could have done it more quickly. I wish I could have presented it to Stuart before he stepped in front of the 11:15 London to King's Lynn train. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mark. We're now going to hear an extract from Lucky Jim by Kingsley Amis. And reading it for us is the inventor of the bicycle, the mayor of this great city, Boris Johnson.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. I was all set to read Wordsworth's immortal lines on Westminster Bridge. And then I thought, hang on, no, I won't do that because this is a Friday night, isn't it, in the greatest city on earth? Yes? And therefore I think it is my duty, my mayoral duty, to read to you one of the best short accounts of a hangover ever to appear in English literature. Dixon was alive again. Consciousness was upon him before he could get out of the way. Not for him the slow, gracious wandering from the halls of sleep, but a summary, forcible ejection. He lay sprawled, too wicked to move, spewed up like a broken spider crab on the tarry shingle of the morning. The light did him harm, but not as much as looking at things did. He resolved, having done it once, never to move his eyeballs again. A dusty thudding in his head made the scene before him beat like a pulse. His mouth had been used as a latrine by some small creature of the night, and then as its mausoleum. During the night, too, he'd somehow been on a cross-country run and then been expertly beaten up by secret police. He felt bad. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great evening, and it is recommended that you drink with moderation. Thank you.
Wait out that, there you go, yes. He's in charge. Our next reader is one of the members of the selection committee for World Book Night. Tonight he's going to be reading the poem Ulysses by Alfred Lord Tennyson. He's the poet, the playwright, the performer, that is Lemn Sissay.
Alfred Lord Tennyson, Ulysses. Come, my friends, 'tis not too late to seek a newer world. Push off, and sitting well in order, smite the sounding furrows. For my purpose holds to sail beyond the sunset and the baths of all the western stars until I die. It may be that the gulfs will wash us down. It may be we shall touch the happy isles and see the great Achilles whom we knew. Though much is taken, much abides. And though we are not now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are one equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield.
Thanks a lot, Lemn. Is anyone else having coat envy? Wasn't that just a... I want that coat. Our next reader, it's really thrilling that she's here. She's made the trip from her home in Canada, especially to be here tonight. She's a patron of World Book Night. She's going to be reading from her book, The Blind Assassin, which is one of the 25 titles. Ladies and gentlemen, here she is, Margaret Atwood.
This is a stupendous event. I can't believe you're all standing out there in the freezing cold. It's cold back there too. I'm reading from The Blind Assassin in a chapter in which a young pulp magazine fiction writer of the 1930s is beginning to seduce a young lady during a picnic in a park. His method of seduction is storytelling, and this is why you should all read a lot. If you are a male person, you will know a lot of stories to tell, and if you're a female person, you'll know when you've heard them before. What will it be then, he says? Dinner jackets and romance, or shipwrecks on a barren coast? You can have your pick. Jungles, tropical islands, mountains, or another dimension of space. That's what I'm good at. Another dimension of space, oh really? Don't scoff, it's a useful address. Anything you like can happen there. Spaceships and skin-tight uniforms, ray guns, Martians with the bodies of giant squids, that sort of thing. You choose, she says. You're the professional. How about a desert? I've always wanted to visit one, with an oasis, of course. Some date palms might be nice. She's tearing the crust off her sandwich. She doesn't like the crusts. Not much scope with deserts. Not many features, unless you add some tombs. Then you could have a pack of nude women who have been dead for 3,000 years, with lithe, curvaceous figures, ruby red lips, azure hair in a foam of tumbled curls, and eyes like snake-filled pits. But I don't think I could fob those off on you. Lurid isn't your style. You never know. I might like them, she says. I doubt it. They're for the huddled masses. Popular on the covers, though. They'll writhe all over a fellow. They have to be beaten off with rifle butts. Could I have another dimension of space and also the tombs and the dead women, please? She says. That's a tall order, but I'll see what I can do. I could throw in some sacrificial virgins as well, with metal breastplates and silver ankle chains and diaphanous vestments, and a pack of ravening wolves extra. I can see you'll stop at nothing, she says. You want the dinner jackets instead? Cruise ships, white linen, wrist kissing, and hypocritical slop? No. All right. Do what you think is best. Cigarette? She shakes her head for no. He lights his own, striking the match on his thumbnail. You'll set fire to yourself, she says. I never have yet. Space it is then, he says, with tombs and virgins and wolves, but on the installment plan. Agreed? The installment plan? You know, like furniture, he says. She laughs. No, I'm serious. You can't skimp. It might take days. We'll have to meet again. She hesitates. All right, she says, if I can. If I can arrange it. Good, he says. Now I have to think. He keeps his voice casual. Too much urgency might put her off.
Thank you very much, Margaret Atwood. I'm just going to briefly meet some more. Oh, look at you in your travel rug. How clever are you? Well done, you. What's your name?
My name's Helen.
And where are you from?
I'm from South London.
South London. Some people have made the journey. And what are you giving away?
Giving away Muriel Sparks, The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie.
A wonderful book. And who's going to get it?
I'm a writer, and I mentor some exiled writers through the Medical Foundation for the Care of Victims of Torture, so I'm going to give them to them.
Bravo, exactly. And who do I have next? Who are you?
I'm Candy Johnson-Brown.
And what book are you giving away?
Seamus Heaney, Selected Poems.
A popular choice. And who is going to be getting that book from you?
I live in quite a multicultural area, so I want to encourage the use of English language through poetry for students and people in my area, except this one. This one, Graham, I'm giving to you.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, everyone. No. I've read that one. And who are you?
Hi, I'm Sandy. I'm here representing the 1,500 libraries taking part in World Book Night and the Reading Agency.
Let's hear it again for libraries. Yeah. And what book have you chosen?
I've chosen A Fine Balance by Hinton Mystery. It's a beautifully written book. I love it for its rich detail. I love the characters, and it's a book that's going to stay with you forever, so read it now.
Right, good endorsement there. Now, this next lady, I just love her. Like her works, she is a timeless classic. She has published more than 20 books, short stories, plays, biography, novels. We share a homeland in Ireland. Tonight, she's going to be reading her short story, Plunder, that's in her new collection, Saints and Sinners. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the great Edna O'Brien. Hi, darling.
Well, Plunder. I almost got away. I was walking towards somewhere that I didn't know. There had been no soldiers for weeks. They'd killed each other off. It was hard to know which side was which because they swapped sides the way they swapped uniforms. My mother, and later my brother and sisters, had been taken. I only had the clothes I stood up in, a streelish green dress and a fur coat that was given to my mother once. It used to keep us warm in bed. And sometimes, when it slipped onto the floor, I would get out to pick it up. It felt luxurious, the hair soft and tickly on bare feet. That was the old world, the other world, before the barbarians came. Why they came here at all is a mystery, as there was no booty, no mines, only the woods and tillage. Even to think of corn, first green, then yellow, or rows of cabbage, or any growing thing, was pure heartbreak. I moved at night, hunched inside the fur coat. I wanted to look old, to look a hag. They did not fancy the older women. They wanted young women, and the younger the better, like the wild strawberries. It was crossing a field that I heard the sound of the vehicle, and I ran, not knowing there was such a swiftness in me. The one who jumped out picked me up and tossed me to the head man. He sat me on his lap, wedged my mouth open, wanting me to say swear words back to him. Their faces were daubed with paint, and they all had puce tattoos. The one that drove was called Gypsy. That drive was frantic. Me screaming, and head man slapping me like mad, and opening me up as though I was a mess of pottage. They stopped at a disused lime kiln. He was first. When he splayed me apart, I thought I was dead, except that I wasn't. You don't die when you think you do. Their shouts, their weight, their tongues, their slobber, the way they bored through me, wanting to get up into my head, to the God particle. Through the open roof, I saw a buzzard glide outside in a universe of blue. Putting on their trousers, they kept telling each other to hurry up, hurry up. For a minute, I thought Headman might kill me, and then he turned away, as if it wasn't worth the bother, the mess. Gypsy placed a cigarette on my upper lip. I expect he was trying to tell me something. By degrees, I came back, little things, the air sidling through the small, clammy enclosure, and the blood drying on me like resin. The lime green dress that I clung to, that I clutched, that I dug my fingernails into, is splotched with flowers, blood red and prodigal like poppies. As soon as I can walk, I will set out to find another like me. We will recognize each other by the rosary of poppies and the speech in our eyes. We, the defiled ones, in our thousands, scattered, trudging over the land, the petrified land, in search of a safe haven, if such a place exists. Many and terrible are the roads towards home. Thank you very, very much, and goodbye. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Edna. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, darling. Now, as we already know, Toni Morrison's Beloved is one of the books being given away. Reading it is one of the patrons of World Book Night. You'll know her as the author of Girl with a Pearl Earring. Please welcome Tracy Chevalier.
Thank you so much for coming out and braving the cold to stand there and show us how much you love books, to show the world. We really appreciate it. I'm reading from a beautiful poetic novel tonight, set in 19th century America. It's about the effect of slavery on an African-American family. And even more than that, it's a ghost story, which is one of the reasons I love it. And I'm going to read a section where the ghost of a girl appears to her family for the very first time in human form. A fully dressed woman walked out of the water. She barely gained the dry bank of the stream before she sat down and leaned against a mulberry tree. All day and all night she sat there, her head resting on the trunk in a position abandoned enough to crack the brim in her straw hat. Everything hurt, but her lungs most of all. Sopping wet and breathing shallow, she spent those hours trying to negotiate the weight of her eyelids. The day breeze blew her dress dry. The night wind wrinkled it. Nobody saw her emerge or came accidentally by. If they had, chances are they would have hesitated before approaching her, not because she was wet or dozing or had what sounded like asthma, but because amid all that, she was smiling. By late afternoon, when the carnival was over and the Negroes were hitching rides home if they were lucky, walking if they were not. The woman had fallen asleep again. The rays of the sun struck her full in the face, so that when Seth, Denver, and Paul D. rounded the curve in the road, all they saw was a black dress with 2 unlaced shoes below it. "Look," said Denver, "what is that?" And, for some reason she could not immediately account for, the moment she got close enough to see the face, Seth's bladder filled to capacity. She said, "Oh, excuse me," and ran around to the back of number 124. Not since she was a baby girl had she had an emergency that unmanageable. She never made the outhouse. Right in front of its door, she had to lift her skirts, and the water she voided was endless. She hoped Paul D. wouldn't take it upon himself to come looking for her and be obliged to see her squatting in front of her own privy, making a mud hole too deep to be witnessed without shame. Just about the time she started wondering if the carnival would accept another freak, it stopped. She tidied herself and ran around to the porch. No one was there. All 3 were inside, Paul D. and Denver standing before the stranger, watching her drink cup after cup of water. "She said she was thirsty," said Paul D. He took off his cap. Mighty thirsty looked like. The woman gulped water from a speckled tin cup and held it out for more. 4 times Denver filled it, and 4 times the woman drank as though she had crossed a desert. When she was finished, a little water was on her chin, but she did not wipe it away. Instead, she gazed at Seth with sleepy eyes. Poorly fed, thought Seth, and younger than her clothes suggested. Good lace at the throat and a rich woman's hat. Her skin was flawless, except for 3 vertical scratches on her forehead, so fine and thin they seemed at first like hair, baby hair, before it bloomed and roped into the masses of black yarn under her hat. "You from around here?" Seth asked her. She shook her head no, and reached down to take off her shoes. She pulled her dress up to the knees and rolled down her stockings. When the hosiery was tucked into the shoes, Seth saw that her feet were like her hands, soft and new. "What might your name be?" said Paul D. "Beloved," she said. "Thank you."
Thank you very much. Next, we're going to hear a poem on the portrait of a deaf man by John Betjeman. Reading it is an actor, radio host, and most importantly, frontman of Madness. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Suggs!
Thank you. Yeah, once again, I'd like to say thank you all very much for coming out on this very cold evening to celebrate the world of books. When I was a kid, I had very little indeed, very little, except my mum always had books in the house, and vocabulary was my way out, and it came out through songwriting in my particular instance. But I'm so pleased to see this enthusiasm for the celebration of books, for sure. I'd like to read you a poem by John Betjeman. Yeah, I mean, John Betjeman is mostly known for kind of frippery and girls in tennis outfits and all that. But he wrote this poem about the death of his father, who was deaf at the point of death. And it moved me quite a deal. One of my best friend's fathers was buried in Highgate Cemetery, where this takes place. Anyway, this is the poem, yeah. The kind old face, the egg-shaped head, the tie discreetly loud, the loosely fitting shooting clothes, a closely fitting shroud. He liked old city dining rooms, potatoes in their skin. But now his mouth is wide to let the London clay come in. He took me on long silent walks in country lanes when young. He knew the name of every bird, but not the song it sung. And when he could not hear me speak, he smiled and looked so wise that now I do not like to think of maggots in his eyes. He liked the rain-washed Cornish air, the smell of ploughed up soil. He liked a landscape big and bare and painted it in oil. But least of all, he liked that place which hangs on Highgate Hill, of soaked Carrara-covered earth for Londoners to fill. He would have liked to say goodbye, shake hands with many friends. In Highgate now, his finger bones stick through his finger ends. You, God, who treat him thus and thus, say, save his soul and pray. And you ask me to believe you, but I only see decay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suggs. Now, another one of the 25 titles that's been given away is the novel One Day. Yes, it's a very popular book, and it's just been made into a film, I'm told, starring Anne Hathaway and Jim Sturgis, to be released later this year. Reading from One Day is the author of that novel. Please welcome David Nichols.
Hello, hello, hello. I never thought in my life anyone would say to me that you're on after Suggs. It's a dream come true, and I'm very pleased to be here. This is an excerpt from a letter written in a Bombay hotel room on July the 15th, 1990. It's from Dexter Mayhew to his good friend Emma Morley, and the only other thing you need to know is that while he's writing this, he's drunk. Since I started this letter, I've drunk 2 more beers, and so I'm ready to say this now. Here goes. We've known each other for 5 or 6 years now, 2 years properly, as, you know, friends, which isn't that long, but I think I know a bit about you, and I think I know what your problem is, and be aware that I have a low 2-2 in anthropology, so I know what I'm talking about. If you don't know my theory, stop reading now. Good. Here it is. I think you're scared of being happy, Emma. I think you think that the natural way of things is for your life to be grim and grey and dour, and to hate your job, hate where you live, not to have success or money or, God forbid, a boyfriend. In fact, I'll go further and say that I think you actually get a kick out of being disappointed and underachieving because it's easier, isn't it? Failure and unhappiness is easier because you can make a joke out of it. Is this annoying you? I bet it is. Well, I've only just started. I hate thinking of you sitting in that awful flat with the weird smells and noises and the overhead light bulbs, or sat in that laundrette. And by the way, there's no reason in this day and age why you should be using a laundrette. There's nothing cool or political about a laundrette. It's just depressing. I don't know, Em. You're young, you're practically a genius, and yet your idea of a good time is to treat yourself to a service wash. Well, I think you deserve more. You are smart and funny and kind, too kind if you ask me, and by far the cleverest person I know, and I'm drinking more beer here. Deep breath. You are also a very attractive woman, and more beer. Yes, I do mean sexy as well, although I feel a bit sick writing it down. Well, I'm not going to scribble it out because it's politically incorrect or because it is also true. You are gorgeous, you old hag, and if I could give you just one gift forever for the rest of your life, it would be this: confidence. I would give you the gift of confidence. Either that or a scented candle. I know from your letters and from seeing your one-woman show that you feel a little bit lost right now, a bit rudderless and oarless and aimless, but that's okay. That's all right, because we're all meant to be like that at 24. In fact, our whole generation is like that. I read an article about it. It's because we never fought in a war or watched too much telly or something. Anyway, the only people with oars and rudders and aims are bores and squares and careerists. I certainly don't have a master plan. I know you think I've got it all sorted out, but I haven't. I worry too. I just don't worry about housing benefit and the future of the Labour Party and where I'm going to be in 20 years' time and how Mr. Mandela is adjusting to freedom. So this is my big idea, and it might be insane, but I'm going to post this before I change my mind. Follow these simple instructions. 1, leave that crappy job right now. Let them find someone else to melt cheese on tortilla chips for £2.20 an hour. Put a bottle of tequila in your bag and walk out the door. Think what that will feel like, Em. Walk out now. Just do it. 2, I also think you should leave that flat. Tilly's ripping you off, charging all that money for a room without a window. It isn't a box room, it's a box. 3, as soon as you've read this, go to the student travel agency on Tottenham Court Road and book an open return flight to Delhi to arrive as near as possible to August the 1st, 2 weeks' time, which, in case you've forgotten, is my 25th birthday. The night before, get a train to Agra and stay in a cheap motel. Next morning, get up early and go to the Taj Mahal. Perhaps you've heard of it. It's a big white building named after that Indian restaurant on the Lothian Road. Have a look around. And at precisely 12 midday, you can stand directly under the center of the dome with a red rose in one hand and a copy of Nicholas Nickleby in the other hand, and I will come and find you, M. I will be carrying a white rose and my copy of Howard's End, and when I see you, I will throw it at your head. Isn't that the greatest plan you've ever heard in your life? I'm sorry if this letter has annoyed you. The main thing is that I think about you a lot, that's all. Dex and M, M and Dex. Come to India. Call me sentimental, but there's no one in the world that I'd like to see get dysentery more than you. Taj Mahal, 1st of August, 12 noon, I will find you. Love, your friend, Dexter. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David Nichols. One giver I forgot to meet. Now, what was your name?
Pat Dark from Putney.
Putney, everyone. They love it. And you're giving away?
I'm giving away The World's Wife by Carol Ann Duffy, our first female poet laureate.
And who are you going to be giving it to?
I'm giving it to sixth formers at Eliot Comprehensive School, where my kids went to in the 80s.
Well done, you. Very nice to meet you. And very nice to meet all of you. And givers, give yourself another round of applause. Now, next, we've got, it's fresh, it's new for us. We've got a double-hander. 2 people at the one time. They're going to be reading some Cole Porter. Please welcome to Trafalgar Square, Haley Atwell and Stanley Tucci.
When the little blue bird who has never said a word starts to sing spring, spring.
When the little bluebell at the bottom of the dell starts to ring, ding, ding.
When the little blue clerk in the middle of his work starts to tune to the moon up above.
It is nature, that is all.
Simply telling us to fall
in love.
Birds do it, bees do it, even educated fleas do it. Let's do it, let's fall in love.
In Spain, the best upper sets do it. Lithuanians and let's do it. Let's do it. Let's fall in love.
The Dutch in Old Amsterdam do it, not to mention the Finns.
Folks in Siam do it. Think of Siamese twins.
Some Argentines without means do it.
People say in Boston even beans do it.
Let's do it.
Let's fall in love.
Romantic sponges, they say, do it. Oysters down in Oyster Bay do it. Let's do it. Let's fall in love.
Cold Cape Cod clams against their wish do it. Even lazy jellyfish do it. Let's do it. Let's fall in love.
Electric eels, I might add, do it, though it shocks them, I know.
Why ask if shad do it? Waiter, bring me shad roe.
In shallow shoals, English souls do it.
Goldfish in the privacy of bowls do it. Let's do it.
Let's fall in love.
The chimpanzees in the zoos do it. Some courageous kangaroos do it. Let's do it. Let's fall in love.
I'm sure giraffes on the sly do it. Even heavy hippopotami do it. Let's do it. Let's fall in love.
Old sloths who hang down from twigs do it, though the effort is great.
Sweet guinea pigs do it. Buy a couple and wait.
Penguins in flocks on the rocks do it. Even little cuckoos in their clocks do it.
Let's do it. Let's fall in love.
Thank you very much, guys. Now, there were just 3 more readers to go, but 3 very special readers. The trilogy, His Dark Materials, is loved around the world, and many of you... Oh, cheering. Reading from one of the books in the trilogy, Northern Lights, please welcome Philip Pullman.
Thank you very much. Lyra and the old man, Father Coram, are going to have a conversation with a bear. Dim light through the rear window of the bar showed a vast pale form crouching upright and gnawing at a haunch of meat which it held in both hands. Lyra had the impression of blood-stained muzzle and face, small malevolent black eyes, and an immensity of dirty matted yellowish fur. Father Coram stood by the gate and called, "Yorick Bernison, may I speak with you?" Lyra's heart was thumping hard because something in the bear's presence made her feel close to coldness, danger, brutal power. This strange, hulking presence gnawing its meat was like nothing she'd ever imagined, and she felt a profound admiration and pity for the lonely creature. The bear dropped the reindeer leg in the dirt and reared up massively, 10 feet or more high.
Well, who are you?
I'm Father Coram from the Egyptian people of Eastern Anglia, and this little gal is Lyra Belacqua.
What do you want?
We want to offer you employment, Yorick Byrnison.
I am employed at the sledge depot. I mend broken machinery and articles of iron. I lift heavy objects.
What kind of work is that for an armoured bear?
Paid work.
Behind the bear, the door of the bar opened a little way and a man put down a large earthenware jar before looking up to peer at them.
Who's that? Strangers,
said the bear. The bartender shut the door. The bear hooked a claw through the handle of the jar and lifted it to his mouth. Lyra could smell the tang of the raw spirits that splashed out. After swallowing several times, the bear spoke again.
What work are you offering?
Fighting, in all probability, said Father Coram. We're moving north until we find a place where they've taken some children captive. When we find it, we'll have to fight to get the children free, and then we'll bring them back.
And what will you pay?
I don't know what to offer you, Yorick Byrnison. If gold is desirable to you, we have gold.
No good.
The bear lifted the jar to his muzzle again, drinking the powerful spirits like water. Forgive me for asking, Yorick Byrnison, said Father Coram, but you could live a free, proud life on the ice, hunting seals and walruses, or you could go to war and win great prizes. What ties you here to Trollesund and Einarsson's bar? Lyra felt her skin shiver all over. She would have thought a question like that, which was almost an insult, would enrage the great creature, and she wondered at Father Coram's courage in asking it. Yorick Byrnison put down his jar and came close to the gate to peer at the old man's face. Father Coram didn't flinch.
I know the people you are seeking, the child cutters,
the bear said.
They left town the day before yesterday to go north with more children. Now, I don't like the child cutters, so I shall answer you politely. I stay here because the men of this town gave me spirits and let me drink till I was asleep, and then they took my armor away from me. And I am an armored bear. War is the sea I swim in and the air I breathe. If I knew where they keep my armor, I would tear down the town to get it back. If you want my service, the price is this. Get me back my armor. Do that, and I shall serve you in your campaign. The price is my armor. I want it back, and then I shall never need spirits again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Philip Pullman, everybody. Next, we're going to hear an extract from Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. It's been read by a patron of World Book Night. He's the author of the novel The Death of Bunny Munro, but also he's the front man of Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. Can you guess who it is yet? It's Nick Cave!
Hello. You all right? Yeah, I'm going to read from Lolita by Nabokov. The first chapter. It's very short. Lolita, light of my life, fire of my loins, my sin, my soul, Lolita, the tip of the tongue taking a trip of 3 steps down the palate to tap at 3 on the teeth. Lolita. She was low, plain low in the morning, standing 4 feet 10 in one sock. She was Lola in slacks. She was Dolly at school. She was Dolores on the dotted line. But in my arms, she was always Lolita. Did she have a precursor? She did. Indeed, she did. In point of fact, there might not have been a Lolita at all had I not loved one summer a certain initial girl child. In a princedom by the sea, oh when, about as many years before Lolita was born as my age was that summer, you can always count on a murderer for a fancy prose style. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, exhibit number 1 is what the seraphs, the misinformed, simple, noble-winged seraphs envied. Look at this tangle of thorns. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick Cave. Well, that's very nearly it. The final extract we're going to hear tonight is from one of the 25 World Book Night titles. That book is The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. And reading it will be the author of that book. Ladies and gentlemen, it's John Le Carré.
For the next 5 minutes, we are in West Berlin. That's not Big Ben behind me. That's the Brandenburg Gate, stuffed with barbed wire. And that's not Whitehall, that's the Friedrichstrasse and the checkpoint from West Berlin to East Berlin. The young American handed Lemn another cup of coffee. Why don't you go back and sleep, sir? We can call you if he shows up. Lemn said nothing. He's 9 hours over schedule, sir. How long will you wait? Until he comes, said Lemn. Lemn walked to the observation window and stood behind the 2 West Berlin policemen. A bell rang inside the hut. A disembodied voice made its ritual announcement. Black Opel record, federal registration, woman driver, no passengers. High above the checkpoint, arc lights sprang to life, casting theatrical beams on the road. 2 Vopos, East German policemen, stood at the driver's door, one doing the talking, the other standing off. A third was sauntering round the car. He wanted the key. He opened the boot, looked inside, returned the key. Finally, unwillingly, they let the car continue across the white line into the western sector. Lemn stepped outside into the icy October wind. The crowd was something you forgot inside the hut. The people changed, but the expressions were the same. He walked over to the car and said to the woman, "Where's Carl?" They came for him and he ran. He took the bicycle. Hang on. Don't go. Where's Carl? They came for him and he ran. He took the bicycle. The others have all been caught. Lemn went back to the hut, out of the cold. The policeman stared at him. What are your rules for shooting to protect a man coming over the wall? A man on the run. We can only give covering fire if the Vopos shoot into our sector, said the man. Darkness had fallen. In front of him ran the road, and to either side the wall, a dirty, ugly thing of breeze blocks and strands of barbed wire, lit with cheap yellow light, like the backdrop for a concentration camp. Herr Lemn, quick, a man, Herr Lemn. It was Carl, shrouded in an old Wehrmacht Macintosh, pushing his bicycle. He's made it, thought Lemn. He must have made it. He's through the document check, only currency and customs to go. Carl leaned his bicycle against the railing, walked casually to the customs hut. Don't overdo it, thought Lewis. The red and white pole swung slowly upwards. He's through. Only the Vopo in the middle of the road, the white line and safety. Then Carl seemed to hear some sound from behind him. He glanced over his shoulder and began to pedal furiously, bending over the handlebars. There was only the one lonely Vopo left between east and west. The searchlights went on, white and brilliant, catching Carl and holding him in their beam. The two West Berlin policemen dropped to their knees, uselessly flicking the rapid load of their automatic rifles. The lonely Vopo fired, quite carefully, away from them, into his own sector. The first shot thrust Carl forward. The second pulled him back. Somehow he was still moving, still on the bicycle, and the lonely Vopo was still shooting at him. Then he sagged and rolled to the ground, and they heard quite clearly the clatter of the bike as it fell, and Lemus hoped to God he was dead. Thank you very much.
John Le Carré, ladies and gentlemen. What an amazing night. Thank you so much for being part of this unique event. It's been so special. Thank you for your intention, and most importantly, thank you for resisting the temptation to burn your books to stay warm. So that's it. Let the giving begin. Give out those books. Let book lovers spread the love. Thank you very much to everyone who's taken part this evening, and a special thanks to not just the givers on stage, but all the givers out there. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.